When I was playing, I was going to school for free, which I saw no dollars from.
Yeah, there's no such thing as a free lunch.
There's no such thing as a free lunch. People are getting paid. This was a business. And so that moment made me realize that as much as I was trying to win a championship for my team, I had to figure out how to win a championship for myself. And that was the powerful moment where I'm like, I need a backup plan.
Today, on the first episode of Dude Better, why we started the podcast, why you need a backup plan, and how to transition through different phases of life. Welcome to Dude Better.
And welcome to all of our listeners, because this is going to be a really cool podcast episode where we talk about conversations to better wellness. And that's our mission, right? It's like there's these things as individuals, and it doesn't matter where you sit or where you are, but it's these conversations that you can have, that we have, that Andrew and I, after years and years and years of relationship, friendship, we've developed, and we have these conversations, and some people don't have that outlet to kind of talk about these things that are actually, whether they're impacting your life directly or there's something that you're worried about in the back of your mind. It's like, these are the things that we talk about, and we want you all to talk about as well.
It's been a atrocious 2 years going through this pandemic and coming out of it with the potential start of World War III. It's kind of just like, okay, here we go again. So I don't think there's a better time for Dude Better. And
Dude better or do better? Do better. Dude better. Both.
Yeah, there's no better time to do better, and there's no better time for Dude Better.
And you know what's so crazy is that we spent this our entire lives with this precondition that we are this male figure. And I think it's important for the audience to understand that we are not from Dallas, Texas, so we are not from California, but we spent most of our lives and where we met in the Midwest. And we were predisposed with this condition that men are supposed to be the head of the household, and they're supposed to be that force, that strong lion in the household that doesn't feel some of these feelings and can't talk about some of these things and isn't comfortable speaking about some of these things out in public. And that's really the driver for some of these conversations that we want to have, because I don't think that's true at all. I think that we are just like anyone else, and we need to be able to have an outlet to express those feelings and share those feelings. And that is really the driver behind what we're trying to do here, Andrew, right?
That's what we are trying to do, trying to normalize talking about how we feel, normalize things that are going on in our lives that 20 years ago, or if we're sitting in a middle school room and I'm talking about how I was in a bad mood and I felt sad about something, kids would literally call you a pussy, or he call you gay. I mean, I remember getting
classic early 2000s. That was vocabulary.
That was a vocab. Yeah. I remember, I got made fun of as a kid. I was just a target because I was just this tall, lanky guy. I joke that I have been this tall. I'm 6'1", but I've been this tall since 6th grade. And it's literally been since 6th grade. So, it's cool to be tall now these days. But when you're young, for whatever reason, when you're a foot taller than everybody, unless you're on the basketball court, it's not cool. And you're kind of in a different world than everybody else, because everybody else is playing, a foot down from you on another level. And so I got made fun of for that. And so I think I came from a like bullied kind of childhood. Now, I did have I did have friends, and I was involved with sports and music and all of those kinds of things, but um, I never was able to really talk about what was going on with anybody, because I felt like if I did, I would get made fun of even more.
So you mentioned a couple things there. You mentioned sports. You mentioned some friendships that you had. I think one of the parallels that I would draw there is that early in my life, I went on to play sports even as a professional. I was a professional football player for a period of time. But back in these high school days, or even entering into high school, you talk about when you were in 6th grade and middle school, going into your high school realm. I didn't know how to make friends. I didn't know what it meant to really contribute to a group of guys or fellas like that. And I feel like I was left out a lot of times as an outcast, as someone that was different. And I'll tell you this, Andrew, like one of the things that people don't realize is that by being involved in some of these groups, and like you said, whether it's music or some sort of sport that you're playing, unless you can make those relationships in those groups, like some people must really feel lost in that world, and and you never really get to build your confidence. And so for me, it was a lot of it was like joining the football team. And once I joined the football team, I had a group of friends that looked very different than me, that were all a part of the same cohort as me. We were all fighting for the same things, but we looked very different. But you didn't see those differences because we were unified around this common goal. But what this has me thinking about is like the people that didn't have that experience and weren't able to develop that unionship and that friendship with people that had that common interest with them. It's like, what do you do in that case?
And I think that's where Dude Better comes in to play. And I think that one of the missions of this podcast is making that okay for people to do, at least a place to go to get confidence that it's okay to be yourself. It's okay to talk about what's going on to other people, and a starting point for people who might be in that position, or they're in the opposite and they're trying to get a new perspective on life. I think that's one of the missions is like I said, normalizing, being able to talk about what's going on, what's in your head, and improve and progress from there.
Agreed. So if there's one thing to take away from this podcast, it's that. I mean, it's really just finding that collective group of people that believe in the same things that you believe in. And what's incredible to me, Andrew AC, is that we did not start in that position. I mean, we grew up in very different realms, very different backgrounds. But for somehow we ended up finding each other, and it was based on this like collective understanding or collective desire to want to get to know each other better. To the point where like I'm coming to visit you in How long is it? In a month? A month from now.
I think exactly a month. Yeah, I'm super psyched about that. I'm super psyched about that. Um, yeah, I think, you know, we didn't become friends and get really close because, you know, it it wasn't that we were seeking anything from each other, and it wasn't that we played on the same team. We may have taken some classes together, but we just started having conversations, and it became an outlet for me, um, just as much as a friendship, to talk about real things that were going on, because I was never really interested in, we talk about girls, we talk about sports, but I was interested in talking about other things and interested in talking about how I was feeling because, we'll get into it, but, I had a long life of, undiagnosed anxiety and panic attacks and depression that I couldn't really put into words. And you were one of the first people that I was able to open up with and kind of start explaining what I was going through with. And
AC,
um,
let me pause you there for a second. What was it about some of our first interactions where you felt, okay, maybe I'll open up to this guy?
I always thought you were the most genuine person. You talk about how you felt like an outsider. And even though I knew that you were literally a star and a stud athlete, you you were also smart and good in school, and but on paper just a someone who excels and just a uh, a rock star. But you were so like authentic, and you didn't project that. You would have had no idea meeting you on the street. Like, I don't, you were not the person that would ever be the first one to say that you were a star football player or brag about yourself. You were interested in other people and you were vulnerable. And I think that's what I saw in you. And it just instantly allowed me to be able to open up and be vulnerable myself. Um, and, as you say, like, we came from, I mean, we grew up in the same place, but we had separate lives and in some ways opposite life experiences. But we were able to connect on being human and talking about what we experience day to day as humans. And that's been the most powerful relationship probably I've had in my life.
That's incredibly powerful. I mean, you said we were able to connect as humans, which is wild because we're all humans on this earth. But there's a lot of things that like go into or disrupt us from being able to connect with someone on like the most purest form of humanity. And that's what we a lot of the times get stuck on, right? It's like, how is this person going to view me? Or I perceive this person's interests as different than mine. And that is actually a blocker that can stop you from ever getting to that point where you can actually have a human to human connection. That's incredibly deep, man.
Yeah. But that's why we're here. I think the the conversations we have are powerful. The relationship we have is powerful, and or we both kind of organically came to the same conclusion that this podcast needed to happen. Um, I'm biased because it's our conversations, and I think they're awesome. But I will be happy if one person listens to this and is inspired to go back to their lives off the pod and try something. I think we're going to talk about different. I like to call myself a wellness hacker or health and nutrition hacker with my diet and my exercise. Those are all things that I can control because I can't control what goes on in my head sometimes. Just it feels like it's spinning with anxiety and OCD and things like that. So those are the ways that I cope, and I think we're gonna talk about those in the pod. But um, I want to, if one person takes one of those coping mechanisms or takes something out of the conversations we have, I'll be happy. And I think that I get a lot of satisfaction out of helping others succeed because so many people helped me succeed that I wouldn't be where I am in my career or in my personal relationships. People like you that I've met that have helped me come out of my shell. I want to be that person for others. So, that's really my self-interest or my kind of goal of the podcast.
Yeah, that's and I'm excited to explore those topics with you, man. And we've explored these topics 1,000 times before, but it's going to be nice to get other people to be able to hear kind of what goes on in our heads as well.
Yeah, now they're listening in.
And now they're listening in. And now there's pressure. But I think I have a very similar sentiment as well. I think for me, it's, in addition to the things that you said, it has been this journey or this ride for me throughout life, trying to figure out my way, trying to figure out how I fit in as a black male in a predominantly white society, trying to figure out what my secret sauce is. And it's been such an evolution trying to get there. And I can't even say that, like, sitting in front of you today, that I've actually found out what that thing is. But I think the journey has been, ultimately the journey has been rewarding for me. And I look forward to continuing to explore those things with you. And in particular, exploring them in late March when we're going to get together. Lives in Dallas currently. And I live in San Francisco, California. And I'm going to be taking a trip down there at the end of March.
Well, we are going to Austin. The funny thing about Austin is, or about my experience with Austin is, I've gone there 6 times in the last 4 or so months for work. And I went out to the city outside of the airport. Remember, I work for American Airlines. So when I go to airports for work, or when I go to cities for work, I'm not leaving the airport. So I've only been to the city of Austin like twice. And the other time was with you.
That was for my bachelor party.
For your bachelor
wasn't
party.
That a fire engagement? Like we were hanging out on the water is that Lake Travis? That's right there.
It was
maybe
Lake
about
Travis.
like 45 minutes from Austin. Yeah, it was Lake Travis. We had an amazing house right on the water. We took a boat. We did the whole playpen thing with other bachelorette parties. That was fun. I had a good time.
Yeah, except when we like tethered onto that boat and we were with that bachelorette party, I've never felt so old in my life.
I feel like they were our age. At least they looked our age. They looked not terrible.
Yeah, they will go with they were our age. But yeah, no, that was a great time. You had some friends that kicked in and it decided to be drivers because the logistics, I mean, it was great. If only Lake Travis and Austin were like 30 minutes closer, then we would have been set. But it all worked out
So when
great.
AC says I had some friends that really kicked in and decided to be drivers, I think he's talking about himself.
Oh yeah, I
And
was
so
one of those. I was one of
y-
those
you were one
drivers.
of those, and I'm very appreciative. I totally remember the trip to the bars. I don't really remember the trip back from the bars, but I'm sure you were uh, a great friend in that time.
So life hack. So nutrition hack right here. So I am not a big drinker. I am super sensitive to alcohol, and alcohol and staying up late is the worst. My brain is fried the next day. I like swell up like a balloon, and I don't like it. So, you know, part of this was strategic, being the driver, because I could control the time that I got to go home, and I got to have an excuse to not drink, and I still got to hang out with my boys. So that was a little bit selfish there, but it worked out.
Well,
And
besides the fact that it was like midnight during my bachelor party, and I'm like, okay, time for the next bar. But AC was like, okay, time to go home.
first ride's leaving in 5.
No, it was an amazing trip, man. You made it amazing. We did some awesome nighttime partying stuff. We did some awesome lake stuff. But I have to say, the best part about that trip was definitely
The
that dinner.
dinner.
What was the name of the steakhouse? Do you know?
Yeah, it was called Lonesome Dove.
Lonesome Dove is hands down one of the best steakhouses I've been to my life and been to in my life. But if you ever get a chance to go, if you reserve the wine cellar, which is 20 degrees colder than the actual dining room, but they give you some super dope like
Shoals.
what do you
Do they call
call
them the
those? What do you
shawls?
call those vests? Like leather vests? Is that a shoal? Is that what it's
Yeah, I
called?
think they call them shawls. Yeah, like
Oh,
leather
they were
shawls. They're
they
heavy.
were
They're like weighted blankets,
they
cozy.
were awesome. They were cozy. They made for amazing pictures. But we had some amazing wine and some of the best steaks I've ever had in my life. So definitely, we're definitely not getting sponsored to say this, but like one of the best steakhouses I've been to in my life, down in
Yeah.
Austin, Texas.
Get
Uh,
get a friend. Get the tomahawk chop. Thank me later.
Yeah, and if you don't get a friend, that's cool too, because it was that good. It was so
Yeah,
good.
call us and we'll come with you, but you're paying for it.
Call us. We'll definitely come with you. But it was an incredible moment. But we're gonna do that again. It's like round 2. And my buddy just had a baby. So I think we're gonna stay at his house. And that's gonna be interesting with the newborn baby and like 2 young adult, or I guess 4 young adults if we include our plus ones, hanging out with my friend, his wife, and his newborn baby. But that's going to be exciting. We're going to get to connect. We're going to get to go and do our own thing when the baby is at home with one of those 2 that we're visiting.
Yeah.
And I'm looking forward to it.
I already volunteered to watch the baby while you guys go out. So this is going to be a win-win for all of us. Whenever I'm in Austin, I just figure out a way to,
To not go out and have fun. Yeah, that sounds good.
I like to have fun before 11 p.m. That's about my limit. pivot because I want to tell you about a podcast that I listen to. I'm a big Andrew Yang fan. I'm not a huge, I mean, I'm interested in politics, but I'm more interested in people and ideas that strengthen basically the humankind.
Yeah,
And
Andrew, AC, you're
yeah,
big into politics.
okay. I'm a little into politics, but I'm really excited about some of the ideas that Andrew Yang has. Not his own ideas that have come, for, you know, before he was born. Some of these ideas, and um, he's talking about it, and he's restarting the conversation, and he's establishing uh, a movement, and it's called the Forward Party, so a third party movement. But anyway, he's got a great podcast. I listen to it. He has really, really interesting people on. And Arthur Brooks was on talking about his book. It's called From Strength to Strength. And he was talking about embracing a professional transition. And he has this concept of fluid versus crystallized intelligence. And so talks about this transition between your fluid intelligence, which is younger, more agile, like quicker thinking brain, sharper, clearer focus, um, and able to multitask. Think of that as fluid. And then he talks about as you get older, you have this crystallized intelligence, which is more wisdom, and you have all this experience that you can now do things you couldn't do as you were younger. You might not be as quick and as witty and as sharp as you used to, but now you have this wisdom and foundation to take on the rest of your life with and do more meaningful projects, whatever that might be. So, he's talking about this, and I got to thinking about you and your transition from being a professional athlete, professional football player, to coming out of that and working as you could say a civilian now. Um, you know, but I know that you spent your whole life basically playing football, and football was your life. And, I can't imagine having spent the 100,000 hours thinking about football and 100,000 hours playing, practicing football and just consuming your life, and then getting to the pinnacle of that. And then all of a sudden that ending basically at your peak, and then not having that all of a sudden. I mean, that goes away. You could go coach, you could go comment, do commentary, but it essentially football's over, and football's over forever. And I know coming out of that, just hearing about like Olympic athletes, and there's more talk about those things now, and the depression that comes with that. And, it's just like losing a part of you. And so I just wanted to ask you about the ways that you kind of cope and deal with, it's been a few years, but how you kind of cope and deal with that transition into your life. I mean, you're pretty successful now. You can talk about kind of what you're doing, um, but how are you coping with that?
Yeah, there's this rule, and it's called the 10,000 hour rule. And the rule's simple. It essentially says if you do something for 10,000 hours, then you all of a sudden, that's the magic number that essentially says you're an expert at that one thing. And so if we're talking about football, I probably reached that 10,000 hours when I was in high school.
That's why I said 100,000.
Yeah, I know you said it. You said 100,000. I'm just I'm going back to this rule by Malcolm Gladwell that we can reference because that's what
I
they taught
love all
us
his books.
in school to do, was to like reference source, write our sources. Yeah, so there's this 10,000 hour rule, and I totally felt like I met that rule in high school. And what's crazy is like I felt good in high school, and then when I transitioned over to college, I felt great. By the end of my college career, I felt like I was the best at this thing that I was doing, and this thing just happened to be football. But you could ask me any question, you can ask me any scenario, and I had the answer to it. But what's eye opening to me is that I spent my entire life trying to get to this 10,000 hours and beyond. Um, and when I reached it, it felt really really good, and I reached it at a very early age. But the reality is that even if I turned into the Tom Brady who just retired from the National Football League at 40 something years old, this man probably still has half of his life left, right? And that's in the best case scenario. And so in my scenario, I've always known in the back of my mind that, like, although I've put in all this time to achieve this certain level of success in this thing, it probably wasn't going to be the thing that I did for the rest of my life. And that thought alone terrified me at a younger age. And I'll tell you this, the guys that I was with that ended up making it to play in college, that ended up making it to play professionally, they didn't understand that concept, that this wasn't going to be an every forever thing. This wasn't going to be the thing that puts food on your table forever. And a lot of guys get stuck in that system, in that ongoing cycle of like, hey, I've got to make it in this one thing, and if I don't make it in this one thing, then I'm there's nothing else for me. A lot of guys get stuck in that cycle.
How did you have the foresight to know that there was going to be a life after football? Because I imagine it's really easy to just to get so ingrained in the day to day, and if you think you're going to become pro one day, just only focusing on that, but it being hard to think about the future.
Yeah, good question. I played a position where the average height is probably 6'5" or 6'6" and 270 pounds. And I was 6 feet when I stood on my tippy toes, and 220 pounds when I entered college. And I was always an undersized guy. And so at that point, I felt that I was fortunate to have the opportunity to play the position, to do the things that I was doing from a football perspective. Um, that also put a chip on my shoulder that said, like, hey, yes, I'm here, but I don't know how long I'm going to be here. And so I think there was, you asked kind of like how I knew. I think part of it was just that, knowing that I was like, I always felt lucky to be where I was, but also having, in all honesty, having parents that were pushing academia to me, that were pushing, moving into something that has longevity, and moving into something that can kind of set you up to sustain a family and sustain yourself for the rest of your life. That was always pushed in the back of my mind. My parents actually weren't big sports people at all. Um, my dad went to UC Berkeley. My mom went to University of Pennsylvania, and they were academic folks. And they said the only way that you can make a living for you, especially as like a young African American male, is to get an education and get a job that someone pays you a good amount of money. That's what I was taught. And so that was always in the back of my mind. So I always knew that I was going to have to check that box in whatever it is that I did to make sure that I'm kind of set up for that success. But I always had this dream as a kid of being a professional football player. Um, and that's kind of the route that I wanted to chase until there was no more route left to chase. What really scared me though is that, like for example, in college, I was being a college athlete, and what's important to know about a college athlete is that you're not there to study academics or study your major. You're there to play football. Especially when you look at Division 1 schools, you're there to be a professional football player.
Especially when they're paying for your college, for you to be there.
It's a business, and so I studied business in school too, right? And like there's no such thing as a free handout. There's no such thing as just giving someone money when you think about it from a business perspective. Someone wants something in return. And for a college athlete, they're investing in your education so that they can win more championships and win more games, and that the head coach and the university can get more money into the university or get more money into the coach. It's all a business. And so having that like background or that understanding has been incredibly um, guiding in my life as I try to, shift and move and make the right decisions. But I'll tell you this, a lot of the people that I played with when I was going through college and even in the NFL, that was it. It was, I am going to make it as a professional athlete and I'm going to play this sport and become wealthy and make a life and raise children based off of this sport for the rest of my life.
I want to go back to something you said, which was you were grateful to be on the team and grateful to be playing football despite your size. And I want to go back to that because I had the same parallel experience going through the pandemic with work. And I think there's a good lesson to draw from this. So I'm a, I would say, a high performer, at least that's what my boss tells me at work. And I never really worried about my performance being a affecting my career, especially for um, American Airlines, the company I worked for. But when the pandemic hit and things were very uncertain, it got to a point where I didn't know if I was still going to be employed tomorrow. I remember sitting just waiting for phone calls or a phone call from my boss to tell me whether I was going to have a box in the organization or have to take a voluntary package or risk being voluntarily let go. And that going through that experience and coming out of it still with a job gave me this just immense appreciation and just I feel so grateful to have a job. Seeing so many people lose their jobs and friends lose their jobs in the company and then just worldwide. And so the question now when people ask me like, what's the next step? What do you want to do? I'm still at this point where I'm so grateful of where I am that it's given me it's allowed me to like be present and enjoy my job for what it is. And it's taken the pressure off the society that wants you to keep trying to excel and trying to climb the ranks and getting away from, you know, taking care of what's good for me and, just trying to get to the top of the machine. And I think it goes back to what you said, we're saying earlier about what males are supposed to do. But it's given me, like you, a appreciation, and I think that's a lesson to pull for people who are maybe feel stuck, or maybe feel trapped, or don't know what's next, to take a step back, take a deep breath, and say, what am I thankful about right now? What do I have right now? I guarantee that every single person has something they can point to as a starting block to say, I'm grateful for this. And it puts the world in a different perspective. And I think that that's what I heard from you in answering your question about how you were able to know that, or to put yourself in a position that you'd be able to be successful after football, because you had that gratitude, and you um, had that um, sense of that overarching, like, sense of where you were, where you stood at that moment.
Yeah. So here's my challenge. Here's my challenge with all of that. I can't go through that exercise on my own, if that makes sense. I can't go through that exercise of like taking a step back while I'm in the middle of chaos, while I'm in the middle of driving and trying to push for a goal. I don't know how to do that. So, like the example that you shared, it's like there's this external force of like a pandemic that you have absolutely zero control over. Zero control over what's happening with the pandemic and how it's going to affect your career. But all of a sudden, like you said, you've been a high performer your entire life. And then all of a sudden, regardless of how well you've performed, your job is now at risk. That moment is not something I can simulate in my own realm if I don't have that actual external pressure pushing down on me. And that's how I felt when I was going through some of these when I was going through the football program. It was, it's like I was trying to make it in the NFL. I was an undrafted free agent. And as an undrafted free agent, they send you this contract, and the contract is beautiful. You're like, oh, I get some millions of dollars, and oh my God, this is so amazing. It feels so great. You feel like you've made it. And then you read the fine print of the contract, and it's like, we can fire you at any point. At any point in the week, I can fire you. And that's that external pressure that's like, even though it feels like I may have made it in this world, I may have made it in this career path, I may have made it in my dream of making to the NFL. But the reality is that someone can just fire me at any second. So there was that external pressure that allowed me to realize that, like, oh my gosh, I need to absolutely crush it at this if I want any chance of succeeding at this sport. But then it also made me realize that, like, if I don't succeed, which is the vast majority of people, I need a backup plan.
Yeah.
I
You
need
need an
something that
insurance
I can
plan.
fall back on.
You need an insurance plan.
And if I don't have that backup plan, it's like a stock investment, right? It's like investing in a super risky asset, and all of your freaking dollars are in that one asset. It's like, if that doesn't come through for you, what the hell are you going to do? And that's how I felt in this entire situation while I was playing football. It was like I'm putting everything I have towards this, but there's a little bit of reserve in there that's like, hey, if this doesn't happen, how can I leverage the experience that I have so that I could actually make a career for me that has a little bit higher success rate than it does for people that make billions of dollars playing professional football?
Yeah. And I think that our examples are extreme, but I think it's good for others that might not be in similar situations to just be thinking about, maybe it's more of appreciate what you have, and no matter how good you think it is now, just be mindful that tomorrow you might need to use that plan B, that insurance plan, and have, be thinking about that in the back of your mind, like you would. In the back of your mind, you know, it might have been ingrained by your parents, um, or, some of that just came from the fact that, you knew that just pure physics were against you when it came to you being at the uh, reaching the pinnacle of professional football.
They were against me. I
Um,
mean, the physics were against me, and I think that when you say it, AC, it makes it sound like it's so. Um, it makes it sound like butterflies and rainbows. Like like I'm taking steps down this road, and it's a very clear path, and then there's a very clear split where I put 70% of my time towards this thing and 30% of my time towards that thing. It's like, no, it's like an aggressive, it's a very aggressive moment. And I know I'm talking about it from a football perspective, but I think it's an aggressive moment from life too. It's I'm putting everything I have on the line to live out this moment of trying to make it in this one thing. I mean, everything, all of my heart and soul, all of my capability to live out this moment of having this one thing and achieving this one goal. But at the same time, in the back of my mind, and this really is a back thought as I was going through this whole experience, was like, I also need to realize that this is probably not going to happen for me. This is probably not going to be the thing that buys the baby formula for the kids that I'm going to have. This is probably not it. And so, yes, I was putting my eggs like I'm a big Tesla investor. I love investing in stocks, and I think Tesla is an
I'm
incredible company.
sorry about the last couple of weeks. Every time, I haven't invested in Tesla yet, but every time I see it doing, whatever it is, in this case, that thing has been on a death spiral, I think of you.
Well, hey, look. I think you got to look at it more from a longevity perspective, and that's what type of investor I am. So I don't want to act like
100%.
I'm a day
You're a
trader type of
you're
person,
a
but like I
smart
believe
investor.
I believe in Elon Musk, and I believe in what he's doing to progress society. And I think that he has something in this company that he started, and I'm an investor. And I'm holding my money there, and I watch these up and down roller coasters, and I'm like, okay, like that's gonna happen. The war in Ukraine is not helping me right now, but that's okay. We're not gonna have a war in Ukraine for the rest of my life, hopefully.
Yeah, but isn't Elon Musk? I'm digressing here. Isn't he trying to provide some sort of cell service to Ukraine right now to help them through what's going on, like a total humanitarian move? It sounds like.
And that made my stock go up 7% today, so I'm not mad about that. But I guess my point is what I did in football and thinking about the transition for what was next. It was like I was putting all of my energy into this thing, and I wanted to be the best at this thing, and I wanted and I spent my whole life. We talked about the 10,000 hours. I spent well over 10,000 hours to get to this point. But in the back of my mind, I always knew that this wasn't going to be the thing. Or I'm not even going to say it wasn't going to be the thing. I would say that the likelihood says that it's not going to be the thing that makes me financially stable for the rest of my life. And so that was the mindset that I went into playing athletics with. And now I'm not going to say that like as a sophomore in high school when I got pulled up to varsity and I was, I had newspapers screaming my name in the Daily Herald every day. Like that wasn't that stuff happened, but at the same time, there was a point when I entered into college and I realized, oh wow, there's a business behind this. Oh wow, my coach is getting paid millions of dollars to coach these kids that theoretically are going to school for free. And I know it's not like that anymore with this new agreement that they have with the NCAA where players can make money off of what they're doing. But when I was playing, I was going to school for free, which I saw no dollars from.
Yeah, there's no such thing as a free lunch.
There's no such thing as a free lunch. People are getting paid. This was a business. And so that moment made me realize that as much as I was trying to win a championship for my team, I had to figure out how to win a championship for myself. And that was the powerful moment where I'm like, I need a backup plan. I need a backup plan. And that backup plan has been what's allowed me to get to where I am today. And a lot of these guys that are playing, they don't have that mentality. They don't have that backup plan when they're playing sports. They have the plan of, I'm going to be the next Ben Roethlisberger.
Yeah, they have a dream.
They have a dream. It's a dream. But society sells you that dream that's what you want. And it is what everyone wants. But like that, it sells you the dream that like anybody can get there. And don't get me wrong, anybody can get there. But there's only one Ben Roethlisberger.
Yeah, and you can't. They're not, mutually exclusive. Like you have to have a dream and you have to have a backup plan. You can't do it with one or the other.
That's right. That is the key. And so that's where my mentality was while I was playing sports. The whole time after high school, right? I recognized that trend. And in college, I was like, I need to have a plan. I was one of one at my college that had an internship while I was waking up at 4:30 in the morning and getting ready for spring ball practice. One of one. The other guys were like, I'm going to wake up for spring ball practice and I'm going to give that 100% of what I have because I want to be a professional football player. But in my mind, it was, I'm going to wake up for spring ball practice and I'm going to give it 100% of what I have. And then somehow I'm going to find whatever percentage is left to give it towards an internship at British Petroleum at the time. And this was at the time of at the oil spill in the around 2009 and 2010 when the oil and gas companies were getting a lot of crap for all the bad things that they were doing. But that was my mentality. It was like, I need to give 100% to this and I need to give 100% to that.
I have a similar story, and I never reached the pinnacle in sports, but we can say I reached the pinnacle of the airline world. I currently work for the largest airline in the world. We'll see if that holds, but I also took advantage of my summers and by doing internships when I could have been, traveling with the family. I remember there's this one vacation, for instance, Tel Aviv. My dad and my sister and a family friend, they went to Tel Aviv for 2 weeks, and it wound up being during a spring break. And I had a unpaid internship set up with an airport that it was not there wasn't enough time to make a decision and like reverse my commitment to this internship as much as my family wanted me to come with them on the trip of a lifetime. But I decided to go do the internship, and that was one of the best things I ever did, because now coming, full circle, that sacrifice I made then paid off to where I am now. And pending whether World War III starts or not, I'm going to get another chance to go to Tel Aviv coming up in April with my dad and my sister and my family friends. So anyway, that kind of made me think about that and having those backup plans, or not backup plans, but um, doing the work that needed to be done now and putting in the effort now for the benefit of the future.
And it's particularly not easy when like there's this like preconditioned notion of like what it is that you are supposed to do in order to get to the place that you want to be. And so there's that gap, right? Like there's like where you are, there's what you're supposed to do, and then there's where you want to be. And so a lot of the times we get stuck in saying, here are the steps that I have to take in order to get to where I want to be, right? Because someone else told us that those are what the steps are going to be. But I guarantee you, if you take a look at the people that are actually where you want to be, I guarantee you the steps that they took to get there are different than the steps that someone else is telling you to take in order to get there. And I found that extraordinarily relevant when I was playing sports as well, because like there's a bunch of people that had never had a 10-year career in the NFL that were telling me what I needed to do in order to have a 10-year career in the NFL.
Well, and the main one is not getting hurt, which you can't control.
I mean that's I mean that's yes.
Sorry. That's like 99% of the equation. It's like somebody telling you how you can lose weight and they're talking about working out, but they forget about nutrition.
And then 90% of the people that are telling you your workout plan that you want to do are not actually following that workout plan. I think that's the moral of the story, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's what I had to learn kind of the hard way as I was navigating my life through making it as a professional athlete and actually attaining it. But what absolutely nobody tells you is that the longevity of a professional athlete is very short. I mean, even if you look at the Olympics, and we just had the Winter Olympics, which I'm not as close to, but I follow the Summer Olympics a little bit closer.
No one was. Viewership was like 50% of 40% lower than the last.
Yeah, I heard. It was very low, but I do follow the Summer Olympics, and I love track and field. But one thing that I literally only watch during the Olympics is gymnastics, because I think those are some of the most incredible athletes in the world. But if you look at the gymnasts, when do they start? They start when they are children. I mean, they're like 4 years old, and they're
you have
practicing
to
gymnastics.
hit the 100 or the 10,000 hours before you peak, and when you peak in gymnastics, you're like 15.
And they hit that
So you
when
gotta
they're in like high school. So like these
Yeah.
high school kids are the ones that are representing. They've become an expert. And again, like when they're going through this process of becoming Olympians, they're focused on being Olympians. I don't think they're very much focused on like education and school. That's second. They're focused
They
on
don't have
becoming
time.
Olympians. They don't have time.
Their brains aren't even developed to even think that and have that perspective. And all they've ever known is gym, nutrition, gymnastics, sleep.
And maybe a little bit of study in between there. But they reached that 10,000 hour rule in high school. And so they become experts, they become the best, and they perform in the Olympics, and then they win the Olympics, and then they do that for a few years, and they participate in the Olympics for 1 to 2, maybe 3 Olympics, and then all of a sudden they're 22 years old and they have the rest of their lives ahead of them. What do you do?
And they're lucky to come out of that with some money and with a somewhat healthy body and a you know clean mind.
Yeah, I mean, and that's all good, AC. That's all really cool. And like, yeah, great. Like you're healthy and you did it and you have a few dollars. You have the rest of your life.
Yeah, yeah. Well, my point being that very few actually have those things, and then they have the rest of their life to navigate.
To navigate.
And they're still, wouldn't have even graduated college. Some of them wouldn't have even graduated high school yet.
You got the money to graduate college, and I get that. But you apply to a program and you got the money to pay for your school totally, and you graduate that program, and you are now 30 years old, and you're applying for jobs that people that are 21 years old are applying for. And you're behind. And that's the best case. That's the best case scenario.
Then it gets darker from there on some of the worst case scenarios.
And it gets darker from there. And you're an expert in something. You are an expert. And you get paid a lot of money for being that expert for a very short amount of time. And then you're thrown into the pool of people, which is everybody else trying to compete. It's not an easy transition.
You go from the big fish in the small pond to the small fish in the very, very big pond. And now you're at a disadvantage because you've spent all your time, all those hundreds, thousands of hours doing, what you're an expert at, and maybe never having somebody talk to you about the future after and what to do then, and
That's right.
practicing those other skills.
So for me in my transition, I like to say that I'm like fortunate to have had this foresight, and I don't know where I got it from. So don't ask me that, because I feel like I got lucky from that sense. I tested being a professional at something, but I always knew in the back of my mind that I was going to be something that in my mind was actually bigger than that. And in my mind, that meant that it's something that I can do for the rest of my life, not something that I can do for a handful of years of my life. And so that when I made the transition into um, corporate America, and I'll say corporate America, I think it's nowhere near the same level of caliber as playing on ESPN on a Monday night. But when I made the transition, it was easier because I always had that thought in the back of my mind that like I was going to pursue a career that looked different than just being a star athlete.
Yeah, and it's not as important that you remember, how you did that and how you had that foresight, but it is, I think, important to take that lesson away and apply it to the common folk like myself, and and whatever you're doing in life, there's always going to be transition, and like we said, you're always going to need to have a backup plan for what's next, and I think that can be extremely powerful and applied to anything. My girlfriend recently opened a business, medical practice. Super proud of her. but she's not the type of person that is, she didn't think she was built to take risks and be her own employer and put literally everything on the line to start a business. And she did, and she took that risk. But it's almost every day that she comes to me with this new thing she's doing as a backup plan. She's getting a new certification, or she's getting a second part-time job doing doing Botox injections. Whatever she's qualified to do in her spare time. She's just of running this business. She's looking at what's next because she realizes, and she's just built this way, that any day something bad could happen. There could be a rainy day, and she wants to build that umbrella for that day. So, listening to you here to talking about that, I know a lot of people are going to listen and say, "Oh well, this I can't scale to a former professional athlete." Well, yes, you can, because you know it. You can scale it to anything that's going on in your life that starting to think about what's next is going to help you move forward for a better future. So I think it's a really powerful lesson.
I think it is. I totally agree. I really like that concept of like continually thinking about what's next. But at the same time, I think what we should dive into in the future is like how not to let that become something that gives you anxiety, right?
Oh yeah, yep.
Or something that like,
Prevents you from living the moment and enjoying and appreciating
that's
the
right.
things you have now.
Wow. See, that's deep. That's where we really need to get into. And I think like even through my experiences of playing a sport at the highest level, it's like I don't feel like I really absorbed that experience because as I said, I was always thinking about, well, this isn't a long-term thing for me. So what am I going to do next, or how am I going to position myself so that I'm okay when that becomes, or if that becomes a reality?
Yeah, it's kind of a weird human tendency to, and I'm sure that there is a term in psychology that explains this, but I'm sure that when you think about your past and you think about football and you tell it, it sounds like exciting and just the ride of your life when you're telling it. But I bet when you really think about it, and I think this came out when you were talking about the transition and talking about being in the NFL, and you know playing football your entire life, that it most of the time was painful and isolating and tough on your psyche, and you had to miss a lot of the important things in life. And I'm I have to imagine that there's something, um, there's a big part of you you had to sacrifice during that time. And now, talking about it, it may seem like it was great, um, but I think we do that with ourselves when we think about the past, and it's hard to live in the moment. But I think when we're able to do that, to your point about not letting the future dictate everything, if if you know cherish those seconds when you realize you weren't thinking about anything else but right now. Because when you look back in the future, you don't want to regret missing um, those small moments. And so I think there's a a thin line that you between preparing yourself for the future, like we've been talking about, having insurance policy, but also living in the moment and enjoying what you have and having gratitude.
So next time on Dude Better, we're going to talk about how do you get unstuck from a situation where you feel stuck. But at the same time, where you're trying to navigate and get unstuck, it's how do you live in the moment and enjoy the now?
And we're not talking about gluten.
And we're we're not talking about gluten.
You see what I did there?
That's right, AC. Yes, you went full circle.
This is AC signing out from Dude Better.
AB and the place to
Good
be.
night, America.
Take care.